Hello, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? This is Brian Smith representing the Youth Stars Foundation, and we are in our second weekend of our Unity Link Up, where we are looking to connect with youth all across the country, coast to coast. This event is put on by the Youth Stars Foundation, supported by RBC and supported by Canadian Heritage. So if you are logging on just for the first time, please share the link. We want to get as much youth involved as possible. So before we get started, I would like to do a Indigenous land acknowledgement, just to let you know that as far as we come together in a virtual setting, that we are also on unceded territories for the country of Canada. And it is very, very important that we bring recognition to our Indigenous brothers and sisters all across the country. Once again, people, I want to tell you that Unity Link Up is an initiative of the Youth Stars Foundation, supported by Canadian Heritage. And we have today our local MP, Samir Zuberi, who wants to bring a few words of welcome to you all.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for gathering us together, and for Youth Stars for bringing us all together today. And I'm so happy to be here to share a few words with young people across the country, from Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, and Canadians at large across the country, for this really important event and this really exciting conversation with Miranda, which you'll be having, Brian, in a few moments. I want to share first off that I know and appreciate, as a person of color, how sometimes it can be challenging. Life can be challenging, right? Like to explain who you are. There might be a lot of questions on your background, certain impressions that people might have of you. But I really think that those conversations are so important. And it's those conversations that help build bridges across our country, help people understand who people are, and helps make our country a better place. Right now we're seeing a lot of, throughout the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of conversation around the place of minorities in Canada. We've seen massive graves of Indigenous youth be discovered. This is a tragedy. We must fully reconcile as a country. We've seen Black Lives Matter protests 2 years ago, and we are right now in Black History Month to highlight the contributions of Black Canadians across Canada to our country and continent. This is an important reminder about celebrating the paths of each and every Canadian. Myself as a federal member of Parliament from the governing party, I'm happy that Heritage, the Department of Heritage, has contributed to make this and other events possible. And I want to urge everyone, even if you might feel disempowered, you have power. What you say, how you comment on social media is power. And each and every word and action counts. Each and every interaction counts. And you'll see a lot of people on screen here today, might be older than you are, who have different paths. I hope that you take a look at their paths and see them as possible examples for you personally, paths that you can follow. I don't want to take up much more time, but I really want to thank Youth Stars again, Brian, for hosting. Thank you so much. Merci.
Thank you very much, Samir. And once again, to acknowledge the support of Canadian Heritage, supporting Youth Stars for many, many, many years. So ladies and gentlemen, I would say boys and girls, it gives me great honor right now to bring to you our keynote speaker for the afternoon. She is a RBC Olympian, recently retired, as I was told. I don't know if you can retire from sports, but she is a retired Olympian. And it gives me great pleasure to bring to you today Miranda Ayim, who is also representing RBC. So welcome, Miranda, and how are you doing today?
Hello, Brian. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to Youth Stars for hosting this wonderful event. It's an honor to be here. Bonjour tout le monde. I know a lot of people are zooming in from Montreal, so this is wonderful. Can't wait to have a great conversation with you here today.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who are on the Zoom, thank you very much, but also We are also on Facebook Live. So if you got that link, you could also tune into the discussion on Facebook Live. And if you have any questions, just as a little bit of housekeeping, if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat. So people, we are right now, it's the Winter Olympic season and Canada's doing wonderful. We are getting some gold medals and kudos to the whole Olympic movement. But we also have a former Olympian too, who's with us today. And Miranda, could you please tell us a little bit about maybe your growing up, getting involved into sports and becoming an Olympian?
Yeah, absolutely. How to put that into a short sound bite, because it has been a 20-year process. But I grew up in London, Ontario, here in Canada. Grew up playing all sorts of sports, soccer, track, gymnastics, what have you, just an active kid. But I eventually ended up settling on competitive basketball around the age of 13. Both in club basketball and also with some of the development teams with Team Canada. So I played kind of pretty much around the clock throughout high school, eventually earned a degree to Pepperdine University down in California, where I graduated with a degree in public relations and psychology. Loved LA, loved all of that, but then decided promptly not to put my perfectly good degree to use and decided, okay, I'm going to give the pro basketball sphere a try. So I went overseas, got my first contract in Turkey, where I played for 3 years over in the professional league over there, and then spent the last 8 years of my pro career in France, in southern France, which I loved as well. And wow. Between all those professional seasons, I was playing with the national team. So I made the senior national team just after I graduated from university in 2010, which you can calculate to see how old I am based on that date, and have been playing with them, and was blessed to be able to participate in 3 Olympics since then.
So how was playing basketball in the south of France? Is it picturesque?
It definitely is picturesque. It's all that you kind of see, the typical, stereotypical French vibes, great food, great culture, and good weather as well. And they love basketball. Soccer is really big, rugby is really big, but in the south of France, basketball is actually really big. So our gym was always sold out.
Okay. I want to go back maybe into your teenage years. Now, was there a particular moment or a particular person, as you were a teenager and you say, well, you know what? Hey, I'm good at basketball. You're playing competitive basketball. That, hey, you can get a scholarship and it can take you places. Was there a particular moment in your life that you say, you know what? Yeah, I could do this.
Yeah, I think there was probably a few different moments. Definitely multiple conversations between my parents and myself. I'm so thankful to have parents that were really invested, and that showed me the importance of having a support system, whether that's your parents, whether that's a cousin, whether that's a coach, a teacher, having people that you can lean on and trust in times when you might need some advice. So having conversations with them about being intentional about where I wanted my life to go. So I knew I loved sports. I was good at it. I was also good at school, and that was really important to me. But I knew that I could get a full ride to the States, meaning that I didn't have to pay for school. I could get a good education for free, no debt. And I was like, okay, that seems like a logical life path for me. So that's what I was really focused on, getting to university.
Wow. But I'm a former athlete myself. I played at Boston University. I played football there many, many years ago when I had hair and stuff like that. But the sacrifices, I mean, you're a good basketball player. You're telling me now that you were an excellent student, but are there sacrifices that you had to make along the way, even in your teenage years? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is that for a lot of the youth that are here and maybe they want to get into sports, maybe they're passionate about something else, maybe they're very good at something, but did you have to make some sacrifices along the way? Was your high school typical, go to school, go up, socialize with friends? Were there sacrifices that you have to make along the way?
In a short answer, yes. But I'm sure you're very familiar with that. I saw that you played basketball football at Boston University. Is that right?
Yeah.
Boston, the East Coast. Nice. Yeah. Definitely decisions around how I wanted to spend my time and what was necessary to reach my goals. So there's this quote or a saying in general that anything worth having requires a fair amount of sacrifice or time or energy, however you want to put it. And getting to the next level or being good at something requires that kind of sacrifice. So like you mentioned, I would go to school, and then after school you have practice, and then after practice you have homework to get prepped for the next day. Weekends, same thing. I'm traveling to go to tournaments. During the summer, I'm playing with Canada basketball. So no vacation. I don't think I've had a vacation from the age of 13 to the age of 33 when I retired, which there's a balance in that as well, in monitoring that, ensuring that you're not grinding so hard that you're burning out, but recognizing, you do need to sacrifice some of those downtimes.
I think something that a lot of people don't really recognize, that, I would say elite student athletes now, because you're still a student at this time, that you're able to balance school work, rather than if somebody was, from the outside and looking, well, how could you manage to do all these things? When you're a high level athlete, there's a certain amount of discipline. And if you can carry that over to other aspects of your life, things seem a little bit more easier. I'm just saying that it's something that I see a lot, and I hear from a lot of athletes too.
Mm-hmm. And an important piece in there is the time management aspect.
Exactly.
Oftentimes when we talk about discipline, sometimes people think like, okay, I'm a disciplined person, or I'm not a disciplined person. Discipline is a skill, and it's also something that's based on the systems and the habits that we create. Like some days it's easier to be disciplined than others. I didn't wake up every day thinking like, oh yeah, I want to go to the gym today and like just run until I'm exhausted. No, putting in those habits and systems that allows you to do what you want to do enables you to be disciplined.
Yeah, and it's very, very important for our youth today that, to have discipline. And we're talking about respect and being committed to something, because, it'll allow them to achieve, but nothing is really given to you. And let's say, as far as with your basketball talent, now, would you say that you were a natural? Because there's people who are just have those natural skills, or is it something that you had to work at? You had to put in the effort to get better each and every day?
There's a little bit of both. And I think there will. And then at the deeper you get into your career, the more it is on the, like, you need to put in some work. I was naturally athletic. Thank you to my parents for those good genes. But I had to put in the work to develop the skills. And then the other side is the basketball IQ, as we say in basketball, to learn the game, because that becomes a lot more important when everybody at the pro level, the elite level, is good. But you need to take it to the next level. Okay, how can I be strong up here mentally as well?
Okay, people, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening into Miranda Ayim. We are part of the Unity Link Up 2022, sponsored by the Youth Stars Foundation, supported by RBC and Canadian Heritage. Miranda, tell me, well, as far as when you were being recruited, so did you have a visit first to go to Pepperdine? Did you go on a recruiting trip? And how was it when you got off the plane and now you're in sunny California? What was going through your mind?
It's definitely a different world. I don't know if I remember my specific thought process at that time. I went with my parents at that time, and they fly you in, and I stayed on in the dorms with some of my teammates or would-be teammates at that time. And you're just trying to get a feel for the school and understand whether the program itself fits with you as a player, but also the whole institution. Does it line up with your academic goals? Does it line up with your values? Do you want to be in this kind of environment? So there's a lot of different questions that you need to assess, not just like, are they a good basketball school, or is this a big name school for me?
Okay. And what was we'll just say like during the season now, what was a typical, and I don't think there's actually a real typical day, but you know, the day of a student athlete, you get up, you got to go to practice, got to go to school, maybe got to watch film, got to go study, hit the books, and then you got to do the same thing. I mean, is it, was it tough?
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, I don't, I know how I did it, but I know that my days were really, really full.
Yeah.
There were a lot of supports in place for sure. Great coaching staff, great teammates, great academic support staff. But again, it comes back to some of those habits. But the typical day, to give you a glimpse into some of my experiences, I remember having that 6 o'clock wake up call to get down to the track to do cardio in preseason. And my poor roommate was a non-athlete. Our coach linked us up with non-athletes to give us a more global, well-rounded education. And she got woken up every morning at 6 o'clock as I was getting ready to go to those workouts. So starting there, then going to the gym, then going to to school, class, maybe back down to weights, and then study hall at night.
Yeah. And I guess you don't have any choice but to do it. And I would say, were there any pressures going to Pepperdine, being a Canadian athlete, that, you know, well, if you don't cut it, or, you know, if things don't work out, you know, you're going to get back on a plane and get back to London, Ontario? I mean, were there any pressures on you, or did you put some pressures on yourself so that you could succeed?
I think there's a little bit of both. For myself, because I tend to hold myself to a pretty high standard. I think a lot of those pressures came from myself, and that's something that I think if you're going for anything really worth having, or something kind of outside of your comfort zone, you're going to feel some of those pressures. And part of growth is learning to be aware that that's happening, B, accepting it, and then C, learning how to move through it. So you're not going to be without those pressures. You're just going to be able to learn how to move through it, like I said, work through it, see how you can use that to your advantage as a motivating factor rather than a limiting factor.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good point for people, for the youth listening out there, as far as to find ways to self-motivate yourself. And, you know, I guess not every day was a great day, because there's certain days where you gotta, you know, maybe you had an exam you had to study for, maybe you were hurt, and you have to push your way through to achieve. How old were you when you started to get involved with the Canadian program?
I was 13 when I first joined one of the development programs. At the time, it was like it went midget, junior, senior, and then the senior national team. So from the age of 13 onward, I was playing with Canada. And, you know, they have different teams that will go and travel and compete at different levels. And then, like I said, in 2010 was when I made the senior team as an alternate first. Okay. So that meant I was practicing, playing with them, flew over to Greece with them. They continued on and played in the World Championships in 2010. I flew back home. And then the next year I made the team and have been with the team ever since.
Okay. I'm just looking once again as an outsider, and, you know, you're with the national team. Now you got a spot on the national team. That means somebody else didn't get a spot. And there's always, you know, there's that competition that's there, because we know that not everybody can make the team. Was it very, very competitive with the national team?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you make it to that level, every day is a competition, and you're always trying to bring your A game to practice, to the games, to whatever it is. But one thing I like to remember, especially young people, whether they're in sport or whether they're in outside of sport, working in their careers or professional area or in academics, you need to think about what you bring to the table beyond just the obvious. So the obvious here would be like my basketball skills, but basketball is a team sport. coaches and teammates are looking for more from you than just your pure basketball skills. Can you put the ball in a hoop? That's not that is not all that is required. I attribute a lot of my longevity in the sport to my other skills that I developed while I was either a player or a student. So my leadership skills, some of those habits we talked about, that dedication, showing up, the work ethic, caring for my teammates, reaching out, because it's really about how you're making other people feel, how you're contributing to the culture of the team, that will allow you to keep that spot as well.
Something that we try to promote a lot here with our work with youth is talking about mentorship and having mentors. Did you have a mentor, maybe when you first joined the national team? Was there a player that you remember, or players that like kind of took you under their wing and said, you know what, this is little Miranda here, she's here, you know, she's good, we're gonna, like, you know, show her the ropes? Did you have somebody, like, was somebody there for you?
Yeah, I've had so many wonderful teammates over the course of my career, both in the pro sphere when I was in Europe and with the Canadian national team. I played under Lizanne Murphy, who's actually from Quebec.
Lizanne, okay.
Yeah, she's been so great, and now she's working with the Canadian Olympic Committee and just killing it because she's just an incredible human being. Kim Gaucher as well. She's from BC, but was my captain for many years. But just individuals like that who have been around for a while. The extremely intense work ethic, really dedicated, loyal, and you know, good on the court, but also really good people. So just watching what they do and trying to copy the good things, copying in that sense is really great. See what works for other people and learn.
You are listening to Miranda Ayim, our keynote speaker for the Unity Link Up 2022. If you are on the live, you can please ask us some questions. You could pose it in the chat and we'll pass some of the questions over to Miranda. So Miranda, going now overseas to France, was it an easy decision? Was it a tough decision? Were there opportunities that were for you there in the WNBA? What was that whole process?
Oh, there is a lot to unpack there, and I'm not sure that we have time, but to be honest, and I always surprise people when I say this, my first contract overseas to go to Turkey, I was really just trying it out. I'm like, okay, I'll go overseas for a year and get the experience. And then I ended up playing for 11 years over there.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you were going to say something, but
no, go ahead.
No, but I love that experience because the game in Europe is really, it's my preferred style of basketball. And so for the basketball heads, you might get that. It's really dynamic. It's not this one-on-one stuff that you usually see in the NBA or the WNBA. It's really collective. And that's what I love, the kind of pure essence of basketball. And that's also why I play for Canada basketball as well. So I loved that, but there was a lot of challenges that came along with that as well. Being a different culture, not speaking the language at first. Turkey, I learned a little bit, but it was pretty rough. France, I eventually learned the language with a good basis from growing up in Canada, but I didn't speak it really. You know how I'm sorry if any governmental figures are there, but I had the basis, but I didn't really speak it, but we learned it. And then you're actually able to connect with people. So being open to some of those experiences and growth experiences enabled me to take more out of those experiences than I would have if I was a little bit more closed.
Okay. And then from Turkey, then you went over to France? Is that you went to France after Turkey? Now, I guess the question be, there were some questions here. I mean, did you speak French, or do you speak French before you went to France, or that's something that you picked up over there?
Oui, maintenant, je parle français. C'est assez OK, je voulais dire.
Il n'y a pas de problème. Il n'y a pas de problème. Okay.
Oui, mais avant, non. But before, as I'm saying, yes, now I speak French because I needed to communicate with people. But before, you know, I knew basic vocabulary, conjugation, and the rest. But to hold a conversation, no.
But here's a question, right? Because I mean, we see this in basketball, and we see this in a lot of, I would even say more so European sports, where you have athletes from all different parts of the world, and they're playing for a professional team. So I'm assuming that was probably your reality. How do the athletes communicate? Is it English as the universal language, or you just work it out, or how does that take place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And normally the makeup of the team is, if I was in France, so the majority of the players are French, and they allow 4 foreign imports. So 2 Americans, 2 Europeans, or other nationalities. But the universal language still is English, which is interesting. But that being said, a lot of things in basketball you can communicate without having to speak, or with like typical words that are English but understood across the board. So there is a bit of kinks to be worked out, but on the court, things flow pretty well. It's more the off the court that you need to work a little harder on.
Oh, okay, no, because it's sometimes we say there's this universal language, and I guess athletes will just find a way to work things out. But communication is the key, specifically, in a sport as basketball, where you have 5 players and you're running plays, and there has to be cohesion and chemistry. When did you decide to, we'd call it, hang it up? As I said, you've been 3-time Olympian. What made you decide to say, this is the time that, I want to wind down, I want to do different things? Once again, to the youth out there, people maybe change of career. What goes through the mind of a high functioning, super active professional athlete who now decides, what, now is the time I want to retire and do other things?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And I think it's a question that each athlete has to pose themselves. For me, I was still playing at a high level. I wasn't injured, but I wanted to retire on my own terms. I wanted to make the decision. I know a lot of other athletes retire because either they're injured, or their market value decreases, they can't find a team, et cetera, et cetera. But I knew also that this was the time. In my heart, in my mind, I wanted to shift into a new chapter and focus on a few different things, like what I'm doing now, working with teams and individuals and helping them get to that next level, whether it's personally or professionally. And my mind kept drawing to that. So I wanted to be able to have the time to do that. And in the same sense, I also just logistically, I wanted to retire with Team Canada after the Olympics. And that happens every 4 years. So I kind of planned out my path like that. And we just had the Tokyo Olympics. So I was like, okay, that's a good time to stop.
So I would say you're one of the fortunate athletes that, you left the game on your terms, you're healthy, you weren't injured, and you just, this is the time to make a transition. Because, sometimes we see athletes who maybe overstay their time, or they don't know what they want to do afterwards. And, there's a lot of negative things that are associated, that some players are just in it for the money, and then there's all the other things that go on. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. Let the people know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a little bit of everything. I have a few different buckets, but what it comes down to is supporting individuals get to the next level, whatever that means to them. Like we already talked about it a little bit today, some of the systems, the habits, the mindset shifts that you need to achieve your goals, and how you can intentionally put that into place so that you can intentionally grow towards your goals. So I help individuals either on a one-to-one individual basis, or in the team basis, working within team dynamics, trying to become a high-performing team, whether that's in the business sphere or in organizations, or doing events like this, panels, public speaking. I also have a podcast. Season 2 will be coming out in the next month and a half. So that's where my passion lies. That's where I feel my calling is. And I really get a lot of meaning from that. So thank you for allowing me to do that today.
All right. And there's a question here. I was actually going to ask a question myself, but they wanted to know, how did you get associated with RBC, and what's that relationship? What does that relationship look like?
Great question. So RBC is one of the longest standing sponsors of the Canadian Olympic team. So they've had that standing relationship with the COC. And so they take a certain number of athletes per year. So you apply, do an interview, they accept you, and then you do events like this, whether it's a panel, whether it's a speaking engagement, like a keynote speech, or an in-person event where you're showing up, mixing as it was in the old days when we saw each other in person. So I do that in the Southwestern Ontario region with RBC, and they support athletes in that way. So it's a pretty incredible way for us to connect with amazing groups like Youth All Stars.
Okay. And there's another question here as far as somebody says, I love basketball. I'm good at basketball and I want to get to the next level. She wants to get a scholarship. What do I need to do to get better and achieve my dream? What I guess she's saying, what is a recommendation that you can give to a girl? I guess she said she's a good basketball player to get to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure exactly what this situation looks like, but one of the important steps is really to be involved with a quality team. So whether that's your high school team or a club team, or if there's some Canada basketball events in your area, go out and try out for that, or at least let your face be shown in those areas. It will give you some experience. And this isn't even mentioning some of the hours that you're going to be putting in the gym. I'm taking that as a given based on what you've said, that you're already a good basketball player. So investing in those teams and finding a good coach who can help you build your skills in those areas.
And I have a question as we close down and wrap up. What's your opinion on parents who put their kid into one specific sport and that's all they're doing? You're good a hockey player, you're just going to play hockey 365, rather than exposing the kids to playing different sports at a younger age? Because we always hear that after a while, a youth will get, they'll be mentally burnt out because they're playing this sport all the time and they don't get opportunities to play other sports. What's your take on that?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Brian, because I do feel passionate about especially youth and children or whatever age, making sure that you're getting a little bit of everything. If you are especially passionate about sports, having those different skills from different sports will actually help you in that one sport. Being able to develop your mindset and your skills in those different areas will help you have a broader base around your skills. And then just mentally, like you mentioned, burnout. I have so many teammates throughout the years who their parents pushed them into this one thing. They had their personal trainer. Guys, I never had a personal trainer, and I'm a 3-time Olympian and I made it. Guys, there are many different paths to get there, and not just different sports, different interests, different hobbies. Like explore different areas that you can be involved in your school or your community. That will help you in the long run, instead of just being focused on like, I'm a baller, I need to do this, ball is life. Life is more than ball. Life is more than whatever it is. Make sure you're staying connected and trying out some different things.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have been speaking with Miranda Ayim, RBC Olympian, retired Olympian. She's doing wonderful things right now. And Miranda, do you have a final word for the people who are logged in today, whether on the Zoom here or on Facebook? A couple of parting words for them, and then where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Brian and Youth All Stars, for having me today. It was such a pleasure to share with you all. A few parting words, just encouragement that if you're here today, I feel like you're already on the right path. You're already investing in yourself. learning from myself, from Brian, from the upcoming speakers who will be on the panel. You have some incredible speakers coming up. This is the way to do it, to learn and to grow. So continue on that path. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions. I think that's great. So that would be my final word of advice that I say to myself still, and I'll say back to you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Miranda Ayim, who is our keynote speaker for Unity Link Up 2022. Coming up next, we have a panel. If you are an artist, we've got the people who will provide you with the links to get the money so that you can develop your career. So Miranda, bonne journée. And we hope that one day we could see you in the Belle Province, and you could visit Montreal. And we, I guess when things we don't have to meet virtual all the time, and we look forward to great things from you. And that relationship with RBC, it's a great thing, and they're one of the sponsors for this event. So we thank RBC for being involved with us as well. So have a great day, Miranda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we are on a different vibe right now. For those of you who are artists, just to let you know that working in the past in Montreal, we've always been solicited by those who are in the artistic field who said, you know what, I'm looking to get support. I want to develop my skills. I want to get myself to the next level, but where do I go? So with Unity Link Up, we said, let's put together a panel of people who we could talk to, who work in the field, who have been through the process, and that's what we are doing right now. Remember, the Unity Link Up, if you're on the Facebook Live, share the stream. If you have questions, please, you could pose the questions in the chat here or on the Facebook Live too at the same time. Also, I want to send big kudos to Malik Shahid, the director of the Youth Stars Foundation. Wasn't able to make it today, but you will be hearing a lot from Malik too. He is the cornerstone of Youth Stars Foundation. So, bringing to you the panel, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, and they will be talking to you about themselves first, because that's what they do. So, first of all, I'm going to introduce Siobhan Battle from Factor Quebec.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Brian. Thanks so much for having me today.
Okay. I'm going to introduce I'll call it our hip hop aficionado or impresario, goes by the name of B-Boy Afternoon.
Hey, what's up, everyone? How's it going? Nice being here.
Are you in your studio?
Part of it.
All right. We've got from the Canada Council of the Arts, we have Isedra Cruz.
Hello.
And then also representing the Canada Council of the Arts, we have Jen McCarroll.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I'm just going to kick this off here. In Canada, we have a lot of youth. We have a lot, not just youth, but artists who are out there. A lot of them are from the Bipoc communities, and they're always looking to say, you know what, are there supports for there? Are there any, is there grant money? How do I access resources so that I can develop my skills? So I'm going to start off with Siobhan, and you could just tell us a little about Factor, what Factor does, and then we'll just go around. I'll introduce the other panels, and they can tell you what they do, and then we could just have a chat about it. And at this time too, if you are an artist who are Canadian artists, this is the time now where you need to put out your questions, because after the panel, you could always contact me or them too, but here we have them live, virtually live, and we could chit chat and get some questions answered right now. So Siobhan, tell us a little bit about Factor and what you do.
Great, happy to. Thanks again for having me here. So again, my name is Siobhan Battle and I am the Regional Education Coordinator with Factor. So that means that I represent the organization. We're a national organization. So I represent the organization here in Quebec. There are people like me in pretty much all provinces and territories. And we're here to act as a resource and answer questions about our programming, about the organization. I'm also here to recruit jurors because some of our programs are jury evaluated, and really just maintain that connection with the music community in Quebec and Montreal, and to reach out to other communities to ensure that people are aware that we exist and that we have funding and money to give away for music artists in the country. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to just ask a quick question. So Factor is specifically for recording artists, right? Is it basically with music and recording artists, or do you branch out into other genres?
So Factor is essentially there to support recording artists and the Canadian independent music industry that supports recording artists. So we offer funding to individual artists, but also to record companies, managers, publishers, distributors, and music events, festivals, and award shows and things like that.
Okay.
But yes,
it's very interesting though, because I mean, I'm approached a lot by artists themselves, but you're saying now, but all the other aspects of the recording industry, you just mentioned publishers, record companies, things like that, they can also benefit from supports from Factor Quebec.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm the representative for Quebec, but Factor Canada supports the industry and artists from all over the country.
Okay, and Factor, as far as in Quebec, basically you would be looking to connect with English recording artists?
Exactly, yeah, and that's a great distinction. Our mandate is primarily to support artists who are working in any other language other than French, essentially. So English and any other language. And we have a sister organization called Musique Action, that receives funding from the same sources that we do. So essentially, we're a nonprofit organization that manages funding that comes both from public, so the Canadian government through Heritage, and private through Canadian broadcasters. But our sister organization, Musique Action, has the same mandate we do, but they support artists in Canada who are working in French or any other language other than English.
Okay. So we're just starting off with a brief intro to sort of what all our panelists do. So next, I'm going to call upon Jen McCarroll from the Canada, I always say Canadian, but it's the Canada Council of the Arts. And tell us a little about the Canada Council of the Arts and the specific department that you work in.
Sure. So the Canada Council for the Arts is Canada's public arts funder. So similar to Factor, Canada Council gives artists, groups, organizations funding for various artistic activities and activities that support the artistic ecosystem. So I particularly work in the Explore and Create program, which is a program that supports essentially the creative research or development of creative projects, also all the way through to creation, production, and dissemination of artistic works. So this is money that goes to artists to kind of just do what you do.
Okay. And the Canada Council of the Arts, you work not just with recording like Factor. I believe you have a broader mandate as far as artists and who can benefit from some of your supports.
Right. In fact, yeah, we support a huge number of different artistic disciplines as well, which we call fields of practice. So, obviously music, and that's kind of my specialty as well, is music and sound, but we also support visual arts, digital arts, media arts, dance, theater, circus arts, tons of different types of artistic practices.
Okay, well, people, you're listening to the Unity Link Up 2022. We are right now with our artist panel. We just heard a few words from Jen McCarroll from the Canada Council of the Arts. I'm going to pass it over to your colleague right now, Isra Cruz. So Isra, you're also with the Canada Council of the Arts, but tell us about the program that you work on.
Yeah, so I work in creating, knowing, and sharing the art and culture of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. And our program specifically is designated for Indigenous artists. Like the rest of council, it's a multidisciplinary program where any art form can apply. You just have to sort of be Indigenous. So everyone who applies to creating, knowing, and sharing has to be Indigenous, identifying Indigenous. All of the staff who work in the program are Indigenous as well. And it is, yeah, it's important that, you know, there's Indigenous people at, you know, this level of funder. As a national organization, national funder, you know, we're representing people from across the country and across disciplines. So yeah, I'm still relatively new. I've been there for about a year.
Okay. Well, one of the things with the Unity Link Up is that I said it is a national initiative. We are 100% virtually online, and we do have in the development of the Unity Link Up to have Indigenous participants. We have Indigenous ambassadors that are working with us, and even a little sneak preview. We are planning for the 2023 edition to have more Indigenous participation as far as with the development, because one of the things why we call it Unity is that we want to connect with people all across the board, and you know, even something within the arts too as well, that it can start there. We could work into so many different things. So our
Fantastic.
Yeah, our resident artist who's here right now, B-Boy Afternoon, who's actually benefited from some of these resources. So tell a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Cool. So I'll make it very quick. My name is B-Boy Afternoon. People call me Afternoon or PM. I'm just in hip hop arts in general, whether it be music or dance. I teach. I travel the world a little bit teaching, doing competitions, and performing. So yeah, it's a little bit what I do.
Okay. And the reason, as far as even having with on the panel today, now you are aware of some of the resources that are available to artists. Have you in the past applied, or have you benefited from any of the, whether it be Factor or the Canada Council of the Arts?
I've applied for grants before. I have received grants, and it was something that came a little bit later in my artistic career, because often for artists, specifically of color and that are in art forms that are not necessarily connected to these entities, we don't know that these things are available. And sometimes even the way our art practices are, they're not necessarily fundable. Things are changing. At the same time, what helps is how you're able to express and explain what you do as an artist, so they can better understand and better make programs or fund what artists are doing.
Okay, so one of the things now, as far as for us as an organization, and one of the reasons for the panel today is to find ways how we could disseminate information and get it out there to artists that, you know, there are resources that are available. I'm going to go back to you, B-Boy. What do you think is one of the main reasons why some artists don't apply or don't know, or whose responsibility is it for them to get it out there? I'm just maybe putting myself in the space of an artist and say, you know what, I need support, but what needs to be done? How do we bridge that gap?
I think there are two main things when we think about that. The first one is that there's a big cultural difference in the sense of not only the culture that the artists have, but as well as how these organizations function. These organizations usually feel very foreign to artists, the way they function, what is required. And sometimes it's seen as too much of a big step for them to make, and they'd rather focus on their art. On the other side, for a lot of artists from specific communities, it looks like something that's almost impossible. Whereas it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to be receiving money, but what's the catch-22? What am I going to have to give up in exchange? Or what are the things that I'm going to have to let go of within my art to be able to fit and benefit from these?
Okay. Wow, I mean, that's very interesting to know. So let's go back to Siobhan. What are some of the things that Factor Quebec does to try to bridge the gap, or get the, or just first of all, get the information out? Because You know, there are websites that are there, you know, we got social media. But I still think that there's still a challenge that's there as far as getting, you know, youth, and I'll say more so youth to apply and get involved. What certain things do you think can be done to bridge that gap?
Absolutely. And that's something that we've been working more earnestly on in the last few years, especially. So events like this is perfect. And that's part of my role is, you know, to connect with organizations who are also working to communicate and promote structures and organizations that can help support artists. So doing events like this, I host a number of info sessions, sadly in the last couple of years, all virtually, but they range from, you know, Factor 101. So what are we about? What can we offer you? What kind of support is there? To specific workshops on marketing, on promotion, on publishing, all kinds of things related to the music industry, because that seems to be a bit of a gap. There's a bit of a knowledge gap in terms of what are the different elements in the music industry that can benefit artists. So not just recording and touring, but publishing, making money off of, you know, licensing, that kind of thing. And then of course, hosting specific community sessions with other organizations and partnering with them to host info sessions for the BIPOC community, for Indigenous communities, to make sure the word is getting out there. And support, that's also a big element. I know in a lot of ways, the application process can be really daunting and confusing. And so that's another reason for my role and my colleagues at the office in Toronto is to act as a resource and answer questions and be there to support artists through the process, from anything from, you know, what programs are out there to, you know, what does this question mean in the application? I don't understand this.
Yeah. I mean, as far as we will call it the show business, and I think that, you know, a lot of artists need to kind of understand the business aspect of it more so to, you know, when it starts with the administration, maybe it could be as far as, you know, starting out to fill out some grant applications that are there and have an understanding of these things. Because what they say is some artists, the last thing they want to do is, you know, spend a day filling out, doing paperwork. They don't like to do that. They like to focus on their art. But I think I would say that the artists themselves have a responsibility to have an understanding, if you're looking to get supports, to understanding how the process works. So, I mean, sometimes the applications could be a bit long, a bit daunting, but, you know, we got to still the same way have that common ground. I would say, Isdra, what has been, do you get a lot of applications in from the Indigenous communities as far as for your program? Are the same challenges there? Are you doing some of the same things? I mean, what are you doing for promotion to get the word out?
A big part of what we do is on social media, you know, especially with trying to connect with, you know, younger emerging artists. And when it comes to sort of barriers, our program has a small scale grant that is $3,000, easily accessible, a much shorter grant, because like Afternoon said, it's daunting. It's really daunting. You don't see yourself, you know, when you're a BIPOC person, you don't see yourself reflected in these sort of institutions. And that's definitely changing as we like progress. But part of like a big part of what Jen and I do is you know, helping one-on-one with artists. And I always tell people, you know, as a program officer, my job is to help artists get money. Very like, so, you know, people are intimidated about calling us, but call us, email us, we're there to help you. And, you know, it's kind of funny. So before I started working at council, I was working in theater as a costume designer. And I never actually applied for Canada Council grants because it was intimidating and scary.
Yeah, no, but that's something that comes up a lot. As I said, you know, you can see an application and it's 25 pages long. And it's like, wow, I mean, my suggestion, right, is, because I do grant applications, and I say, what, if you're an artist, maybe do 2 pages a day, just pick at it. Don't look at it and say you're going to do everything one time, and just pick at it and pick at it. And it becomes a skill to it at the same time, but it can be daunting.
Yeah, and that's why we, like, in the Indigenous program, we created the small scale, because very much it's about accessing and breaking down barriers. And it's a much shorter application because, there's a lot of Indigenous communities, especially in like far north, Northern Ontario, that don't have like great internet access. So, doing a 25-page application online is tough. And there's already the barrier of location. So, our small scale grant is, it's like a page and a budget, and that's pretty much it. It's like 1 page and a budget, and people, who have slow internet, who have, limited access to internet, will be able to do that application.
Okay, so
sure.
my understanding so with the Indigenous program, any Indigenous artist can apply. It could be a singer, a rapper, it could be somebody who does what call it,
Theater.
Theater,
Yeah.
theater, yeah. They can apply and access resources. Okay.
Yeah, and the great thing about the Indigenous program at Canada Council is that, as Indigenous artists, our culture is very intertwined with the art that we do. And, cultural practices and protocols tend to sort of feed into our art. So all of our assessors in our program are Indigenous as well, so that there's a way of, so that artists feel like they're being, judged or like assessed by their community, and by people who understand where they're coming from and their artwork. And,
No, I was going to say that it maybe ties into what B-Boy was mentioning, that sometimes artists send in their applications, but how do we know that the people who are evaluating our applications really understand what we're doing? So I mean, I think that's something that's very, very, very key, that that you're being judged by your peers.
Yep. Yeah, it's super key and important, especially because in the Indigenous arts program, we accept a lot of different art forms that aren't, what you would traditionally think as art forms,
Okay.
So as I said, culture really plays into what we're doing. So, I've had artists apply for going on the land and, trapping and, high tanning that feeds into their, fashion practice, or feeds into, writing their book. So, we fund these sort of different things that might not be eligible in other programs at other sort of funders. And, that's Canada Council's way of responding to, Indigenous sovereignty, is that we get to determine what it is that we want to create, how we want to create it, and who is assessing.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Unity Link Up 2022. We are speaking with our artist panel, with Siobhan Battle from Factor Quebec, Jen McCarroll from the Canada Council of the Arts, Israel Cruz from the Canada Council of the Arts, and artist B-Boy Afternoon. Jen, just to go back with your program too as well, does the Canada Council of the Arts, if I'm an artist and I want to apply for one of the, we'll call it plethora of resources that are there, is there somebody at the Canada Council of the Arts that can help me with my application? What does that process go from? I got the idea, Canada Council of the Arts is there for me. What's that process like?
That's a great question. And I love that Isidra mentioned how her experience before getting to Canada Council was one of not really understanding or feeling welcome at Canada Council. And I had the exact same experience before working here. I actually used to, and it's not because I don't understand funding, because I used to do what Siobhan does. Hi, Siobhan. Nice to see you. In Northern Ontario. So I understood Factor, I understood other funders, and Canada Council seemed really intimidating. And now that I understand it from the inside, I just want to yell it from the rooftops. And I see how much my colleagues want to help applicants. So I would say, your number one step would be to check the website and have a little browse and just see kind of what funding programs exist and see if you can find your place in there. And if you have, read the guidelines. That's like number one, because guidelines have the information you need to know whether something fits or to know how to present your application. Then from there, reach out, because the contact information is on the website, it's in the guidelines. We really do want you to reach out, because it really does help your chances. What we can do in a conversation with you is, answer questions that you have for sure, but also kind of contextualize everything for you. Like, one of my favorite things is to really dig into the assessment criteria with potential applicants and talk about, well, what does artistic merit mean and how is that interpreted by an assessment committee? We're also peer assessed, so it's artists from across the country who are assessing the application. So, how do they interpret artistic merit? How do they interpret impact? What does this mean? And what things do you have to make sure to put forward in your application? So I like kind of brainstorming with artists to see, to talk about their project and how they might present it in a way that aligns with our assessment criteria to get better chances.
So when an artist reaches out, right? Because I've gone through the site too as well. So you gotta first you have to create a profile. You got to create, I believe that there's an artist profile that's there too as well. So there are basic things that have to be done, because you have to be somebody, and understanding too that this is public money that's there. So it's there's accountability that has to be there. But something that I've tried to stress for a lot of artists, specifically through the whole pandemic, because a lot of people have been limited as far as, with performing, and taking these times now to say, what, you may be looking to apply to Factor, you may be looking to apply to the Canada Council, take the time and develop your profile and get those things out of the way, so that when there are calls for funding, that you've got that part out of the way, and you could work on, applying for the grant, which is another step. But just taking that first step.
I'll speak to that a little bit. Thank you for that, Brian. Because before you can apply, you do have to have an approved applicant profile. So just because we love bureaucracy. So essentially what you need to do is you just need to make a profile on our portal, which you can find on our website, and upload your artist CV, which is something we can help with as well if you ever want to reach out. And from your CV, we should be able to see what your artistic activities have been, and we can help validate whether or not this profile is right for you. So there are profiles for what we call professional artists, and that's anyone who's had, all the fields of practices have a bit of a different take on what eligibility is. But for music and sound, for example, you just have to have at least 2 years of professional experience, which just means that you've had at least one paid show or one release that you've made a bit of money on. Like, have you released something on Spotify and you made those 0.0003 cents? Perfect. That's professional.
That's a very important thing, because artists will say you got to be professional or you're amateur. And what is the, is it white and black? Is there a gray area to it? What consists? I know that in past discussions with Siobhan, as far as we were talking about, what consists of an album? What's an album today? Is it like 3 songs? Is it 5 songs? There's a lot of things that, because the entertainment industry is changing. And before I get to B-Boy with a question, this is just something I want to put out to the panel. What are your organizations doing to keep up with the changing the landscape of the entertainment industry? because you are government agencies and sometimes there is bureaucracy that's there. I mean, I think an artist now who comes up and says, you know what, I've got 10 million streams on my YouTube page and I've got this going on. I mean, does that matter when they're applying for funding?
For Factor, absolutely, yeah. And I'll say I've been in this role with Factor for 17 years now. I don't know how that happened. Where did those years go? And before that, I actually was working in the music industry, writing applications to Factor and Musique Action and a number of other organizations. And the one thing that has always impressed me with Factor has been the fact that we have been able to evolve relatively quickly for, as Jen said, sort of a bureaucratic organization. We have changed things over the years to address the changes in the music industry. So one of the big changes over the last 5-6 years has been before what we offer programs that can serve artists who are just starting out or artists who have had a career for 10 years or more. So we want to make sure that we can support artists at different stages of their careers. But a lot of the larger grants were determined by album sales alone, which, as anyone knows now, that's not really happening. So we changed our criteria for eligibility to different levels of funding based on 17 different criteria. That includes streaming, that includes a presence on social media, that includes licensing, touring, revenue, all kinds of different revenue streams. Sales, yes, but a whole bunch of other criteria. So it's not just based on album sales, which worked 20 years ago, but it's not really happening now.
Okay, B-Boy, so you said that you've applied for funding and you've been successful later down the road, right? Like it, maybe not the first time, the second time, but further along. When you applied those first couple of times and you didn't get it, like, did you just say, forget that, that's not for me, you know, they don't know me, or what made you to reapply to now then you've been successful to get funding? I mean, what's that thought process? Because I know a lot of artists said, you know what, the first time they didn't get it, it's not for me, they don't understand me, and they just shut themselves out. That's not your case. So just tell me a little bit about that.
So here's the thing. So for a lot of artists that are going to come from different artistic backgrounds that are not usually what these institutions do fund, it's almost impossible if you're coming on your own for you to get the grant the first time. The language that needs to be used, how things are to be presented, there's a lot of things that quote unquote can work against you. I'm someone that's very determined. So if I didn't get it the first time, I was like, all right, it's cool, but I'll get you around the corner. And I kept applying. There's a lot of things that people can do to be able to be successful on the first try. And that really comes down to reaching out to many different people that have gotten grants prior, those institutions themselves, and also to look within your own community. For example, if you make, I don't know, R&B music, start looking at who's received grants before and who you know that's working on getting grants. Often within, for example, the hip hop sphere, we're very competitive with each other, but this is something where it helps elevate every single artist and at the same time, the craft itself. So I often suggest for people to reach out, work together, because even though you're applying for perhaps the same grants, you don't have necessarily the same goals, and it's not going to be seen the same way when it's presented to a jury.
Okay, no, I mean, it's really, really interesting as far as working together, having a collective approach. I mean, as I said, you know, we each have our individual things, but somebody had mentioned to me when BIPOC or, you know, people of color are looking to get money, the way the system is set up right now, we have to go and get the money together. Doing it like, you know, there's 10 of us, okay, 10 of us, we're going to come together and get that money, rather than doing it individually where they got to deal with 10 individual persons, and then it's like, it doesn't work out that way. So there has to be this mindset. And do you think, or I don't know, maybe with the artists that you work with, is that mindset, is it changing, or is there still a lot of work to be done on the side of the artist now?
It's difficult because it's a double-edged sword. So for example, I'll take me for instance, I'm a dancer, I do street dances, and I've applied for grants and gotten them. Now, here's the double-edged sword. I can apply for a grant on my own to work on a project that I'm specifically going to create. Might it be research for a new show, or I can bunch myself up with 5 other artists that are qualified, that have good resumes, so we can work on a show together. The upside is that us being together, us having value as artists, it might be easier to get the money. But on the downside is that it might not necessarily be specifically what I want to do. It's more of a collective project. So there's give and takes for how you're going to go about it.
Okay. No, it's very interesting because I said the collective is there. A question, maybe as far as maybe I want to put another question out there, and anybody could feel free to chime in. Here in the, I want to make sure look here in the province of Quebec. I mean, there's certain biases that exist where people of color, people who don't, look, I'll just call it the BIPOC communities, don't have access to traditional funding, which is there. It could be in Quebec because it could be a language thing. We have this whole culture thing as far as with Quebec, as far as what Quebec culture looks like. And it's a question that's always been posed to me to say that, well, you know what? Quebec has funding for cultural artists, but the people there don't fund what's there, what I want to put forth. What do any of you, does anybody have anything to say about that? I mean, it can be a touchy situation, but it's a real life situation that's faced by a lot of visible minority artists here in Quebec, and probably the case could be in other provinces too at the same time. And, kudos to the Canada Council of Arts, in fact, in Quebec, you're doing stuff now, but it can be a big source of frustration for some artists.
I can jump in on this one. At least at Canada Council, while we don't have any funding programs that are directed only to BIPOC artists, we do have designated priority groups. So that includes Indigenous artists, culturally diverse artists, which just means folks from various cultures, not white, deaf artists and artists who have disabilities, and official language minorities. So that means Anglophone artists in Quebec and Francophone artists outside of Quebec. And the way that kind of plays in is that there's an extra envelope of money to go toward our designated priority groups. So while in the assessment, it doesn't really play in. It's not like, oh, these projects or these artists are going to move up because they've self-identified. It's really just that once we have a final ranking from the peer assessors of everybody in that group that's been assessed for the grant, we give money away until we run out of the regular budget. And then that extra envelope of money allows us to kind of just fund a few extra projects that are from applicants from one of these designated priority groups. So that's one of the ways that we try to uplift marginalized artists. Other ways too that are kind of just more baked into the system is that we have like context briefs, which are just kind of documents that we provide to our peer assessors that are about minoritized or lesser known artistic practices, so that they are equipped to assess all files, that they kind of maybe better understand the context in which some of the applicants are approaching their projects. And yeah, a couple other things like certain applicant profiles that aren't necessarily for artists, but for cultural connectors, kind of recognizing that there are people in certain communities who have a role that's more about connecting artists rather than being an artist themselves, and that's a huge part of the ecosystem. So yeah, those are some of the ways that we try to assess the equity issues that we know exist. Yeah, Isidra?
And also, both in the Indigenous program and the larger Canada Council, we've also started accepting and changing what kind of projects are eligible, because when Canada Council started, it was definitely based on Eurocentric art practices. And so over the last 20 years, we've really changed what kind of things are acceptable, or not accept, but eligible. And I think that makes a big difference because it reflects, it allows, BIPOC artists to do the work that they want to do, and see it reflected in how things are changing. And yeah, so that's pretty important, because spoken word traditionally wasn't funded before a certain point, and then it's like, well, no, this is now, this is a big art form, and we need to adjust as an institution. We need to adjust ourselves instead of making artists fit into our box.
Okay, we have a question
Yeah,
here.
I'll jump in again for one more thing. Like, another example of that is how in the general ineligible activities for Canada Council, there's like contests and competitions, but that was eventually, it was kind of like, okay, this actually cuts out a huge swath of activities, like especially in the hip hop community, where there are like ciphers and dance battles and like you were saying, poetry slams and stuff. Like, these are all legitimate artistic expressions that sort of ended up kind of getting lumped in to what might be considered ineligible. So yeah, these are just kind of evolutions that are constantly happening.
Yeah.
How important is it, for example, an artist goes through the process, they put in an application. Is it important for them to show that there's going to be other sources of funding for their project? So say I'm an English artist in Quebec, I put something in with Factor Quebec, I put something with the Canada Council, maybe there's some private funding that I have, I put some of my own money, and there's diverse sources of funding for my overall project. Is that a plus, or does that matter in the final end? Does that play a key role whether my project is going to be accepted or not?
Well, I can speak for Factor with the majority of our juried programs, so the programs for individual artists. The funding is up to a maximum that recognizes 75% of the budget. So the idea is that the artist would have to invest 25% of whatever their total budget is. So there's no hard and fast rule on how that happens. If it's money from another funding organization, that's fine. If it's, and this happens a lot, put on your credit card, that's fine as well. However else you want to find the funding. But that's where there is a demand on the artist to invest some money of their own or some other source of funding, but it's limited to 25%. So Factor will kick in the 75.
Okay, and it leads up to a second question to that, because let's say we live in a virtual world, there's less physical barriers that exist. Say if I'm a Canadian artist and I'm producing Canadian content, but the people who watch me, my fans are they're in Europe. Is that a bonus or a plus? How does that all work out to say that, you know what, I'm a Canadian artist, I'm producing music here in Canada. Maybe the Canadian people haven't bought into me yet, and that's maybe what I want to do, but my fan base is in Europe and it's proven. How does that work in the whole grand scheme of things? If anybody wants to chime in with that.
I can jump in on that. As far as Factor is concerned, that's great. I mean, obviously we want to support Canadian artists and we want to support them here at home. But if you happen to have a huge following in Germany, then great, maybe you should be touring Germany when we can all tour again. But, focus your marketing efforts on the areas, the geographic areas, the communities, the platforms that are consuming your product and that are fans and really supporting you as an artist. That's all part of the marketing.
Okay, and you just said touring Germany. I've gone through the Canada Council Arts. Now, is there funding for Canadian artists to take their skills international, or is there funding streams for that as well?
Yeah, we actually have a whole department called Arts Across Canada and Arts Abroad. And so that is where people apply for touring. Yeah, the whole department. And then within Creating, Knowing, Sharing, we also have a travel grant for individuals to sort of, like, for example, filmmakers, if they want to attend a festival where their movie is being played, or to attend, a workshop overseas or whatnot. So we have the additional travel funds in our department.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching the Unity Link Up 2022, put on by the Youth Stars Foundation, sponsored by RBC, sponsored by Canadian Heritage. My name is Brian Smith. I'm your host today, replacing Malik Shahid. You're listening to our artist panel with Siobhan Battle, Jen McCarroll, B-Boy Afternoon, and Isra Cruz. Another question, and I think as far as with coming back to also with money and development, are there any specific programs that are targeted now? When I say youth, I'm saying under 13. Is there an age limit for one to access funding? How does that work out for we'll call them child artists?
We at Canada Council, to apply, you actually have to be over 18 or older to apply. But some projects do include youth. And so if there's an eligible applicant whose project does implicate youth participants, then that's totally fine.
And that factor, there's no age limit, but if you are under 18, you have to have a parent or guardian sign off on the application and be the applicant and receive the funds if it's granted funding.
Okay. B-Boy, you're involved with a lot of youth here in the city of Montreal. I mean, I'm hopeful that a lot of them are tuned in today, but I mean, what do you think is really going to have to take place to get that uptake of getting more people just to apply? And you could even say just even go on the websites and know about this information, but what is it really going to take for them to really, hey, there's resources there. You said you were determined. I think that, do they have to come with that same game face, that same determination, that same motivation just to apply for the funding?
I think when we're talking about youth applying, there's many things that can be done on many levels in order to encourage them. I think the first one is on artists to let people know when they get grants, share that information. Once again, I do believe that a lot of people think it's a competition, and to the opposite, it allows the overall Canadian artistic community to grow, and at the same time to be able to cross-pollinate and grow together. So I think that's one of the first things for artists, to share that information and to let people know that they've been successful. I think the second thing is for youth to try out, not to be afraid of something that they don't know about, ask questions, and just, like I said, try. The worst thing that can happen is that you learn something, and the best thing that can happen is that you actually do get a grant. And I think the last thing, it's on the side of the granting bodies to try to find new ways to reach youth. Might it be through people that are going to be ambassadors? Might it be through maybe new ways of application, maybe speed rounds for up and coming artists or youth where they can literally drop their information. Understanding that not everyone is comfortable with writing. It is the weakness for a lot of youth sometimes, and specifically in a way that a jury can understand. And at the same time that it can be a barrier. I know some very successful and incredible artists that are just not, unfortunately, gifted with a pen or to be able to write a grant. And then it causes a problem because some of them will end up reaching out to get help from people to write grants. But then it does also create the problem of sometimes people being professional grant writers and not necessarily actually having the art skills to back it up.
Yeah, I think one of the things, my experience with working with youth, and I've been fortunate to be associated with, say, Carrefour Jeunesse Emploi Côte-des-Neiges, where the head of the organization has always encouraged the staff there to help youth as far as with development on, I would call it more on the administration side. So, it's not just say a youth coming there, okay, I'm looking for a job or I want to start up a business, but also an artist can approach these organizations, say, you know what, somebody be there to help me develop my artistic project and have that mindset. I've been able to create, there's a project which I have there, it's been over 13 years, called Money, and there's a lot of direct and indirect bonuses that have come out of that, where exposure has been there for youth, and different ways to encourage them. So once again, having that collective approach, right, where there's organizations that are supposed to there to help you, they can help you fill out some of these applications. We have some questions.
Sorry, can I just interject one thing? So at Canada Council, we have and this is targeted to aspiring artists specifically. So in Explore and Create and the general programs, we have the new and emerging early career artist profile. And that's for people who have under 2 years of professional experience as how Canada Council defines it. And then we have the matching in the Indigenous program, we have aspiring artists. And it's really for people who are emerging, trying to start their career. Sometimes it's people who have done sort of the traditional school route. Often, especially in the Indigenous arts program, it's just people who have mentored with other artists, because I think that's something that has definitely shifted in the arts landscape, is that less people are depending on sort of traditional schooling, and really learning things through mentorship. And the great thing about these profiles is that means that people who are emerging can access our supporting artistic practice, which is where you would go for professional development and mentorships. So you can actually apply for money to work with somebody as, a new artist who's trying to figure it out. And it can be anything, we've had people who have done accounting for artists, and a lot of people apply to work with another artist and mentor in that way. So it's so there's that sort of access point for new artists.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say, as with the past couple of years, there's been a lot of funding that has been put into the Black community and also in the Indigenous community in Canada. So I think what I've seen is that there's a lot of, I would say, artist-based organizations that are also trying to, provide supports for artists, whether it could be putting together for their personal development, professional development, supports to do grant writing and things like that. So there are a lot of different, I would call them external supports that are there. And I also encourage anybody who's also watching today to seek out those supports, or if you need to find them, you could always, reach out to us. Here is not a question, but it's from anonymous attendee, and he says, one of the problems that we experience in Quebec is that we have a lot of independent English music artists who do not know how to fill out the forms properly, and especially how to write requests properly. And we find ourselves in competition with all of Canada, and also the labels who have the resources and the contacts to fulfill the requests. What are the resources for English music artists to know how to properly complete the applications? Is there a possibility to separate grants by province? And it's a question for Factor. And he was asking some stuff too as well. To have a clear distinction between Factor Quebec and Factor Canada.
Both great questions. So there's one organization, Factor Canada, but we have representation in almost every single province and territory. So I'm the representative for Quebec, but I work for Factor Canada. So it's one national organization. And in terms of being in competition, yep, you're in competition with everybody in the country who's applying for funding through Factor. But the distinction is that our programs work according to genre. So for instance, a couple of our programs that are appropriate for artists who are just starting out. So I included the link in the chat there for one called the Artist Development Program. This is a juried program. And when you apply for it, you have to indicate what genre you're working in, because the juries are based by genre. So if you're working in hip hop, And this kind of speaks to some of the conversation earlier. You're not going to have a bunch of jazz heads adjudicating your application. So the genre that you apply under will be juried by music industry professionals and other artists who are working in that genre as well. So they understand the genre, they know what works from a marketing perspective in each genre. So, you know, what you're going to do to market your pop album is not necessarily going to be the same thing to market your classical music album. So that's one way that that we manage that. In terms of who can help you, that's, again, I think Jen and Isidra mentioned this, that's my job. So please come and talk to me, because I'm here to help. And my colleagues who work in the main office for Factor is in Toronto, but that's also their job. We have project coordinators there whose sole job is to support artists and help walk them through the programs, walk them through the applications. And Jen, I really like what you had to say too, in terms of it's a conversation. If you have come and have specific questions or want to know, you know, what you're eligible for, that's fine, happy to help out. But in most cases, it's really a conversation about, you know, who are you? What do you do? Where are you coming from? What do you want to be doing? Have you released an album before? If not, that's fine. Let me help you direct you to the right program. So really, I would say the first point of contact is reach out to us, reach out to me. That's what I'm there for. And we can help walk you through it. And it's not just a one-time deal. It's if you come to me and say, I need help, I don't know what to apply for. And I say, okay, maybe you want to look at this. And then 3 weeks later, you have a look at the application. You say, oh, I have no idea what any of this means. Then we can sit down together and, in this case, virtually most times or over the phone, walk through what the criteria is and what that means for you. Yeah, so it's really customized.
Yeah, I mean, for any of the artists that are listening out there, you have to reach out. If you don't reach out, then there's no contact made. So you have to make, you know, use of the resources that are there. We are 2:30 right now, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you are listening to, or you're watching, the Unity Link Up 2022 put on by the Youth Stars Foundation. We are with our artist panel. We have a question here too as well from our Instagram, and they want to know that with the COVID pandemic, has that slowed down the process of people applying for funding? Has it pushed deadlines back? And once COVID is done, are things going to get back to what they say the new normal? What has COVID affected your organizations?
I'll jump in on this one. When COVID first happened in March of 2020, our very first cutoff date for applications after that in our program was pushed. It was at the very beginning of April, and it was pushed for a couple of weeks, but mostly because we knew that a lot of artists were re-strategizing completely for the upcoming year, knowing that a lot of their otherwise accessible revenue streams were drying up. And since then, we've actually gotten, the past couple of years, we've gotten a lot more funding from the government to be able to put into the arts, to be able to keep artists working. We've actually had higher application numbers than we've ever had because, you know, artists are kind of woodshedding right now. So it's a lot of creative projects, a lot of artists just kind of with time on their hands and creating new things. You know, we still have touring and travel programs, and as long as applicants and artists are doing their due diligence to make sure that they're keeping themselves and their collaborators safe, then that's fine by us. So it's really on the artists. I mean, there also is an extra, you know, question in the application that just kind of asks, like, how are you considering COVID-19 in your project, and you know, do you have a plan B or do you whatever? And it just kind of gives the committee, the assessment committee, an idea of how you might pivot your project if something happens and you can't do it the way you want to, even though delaying is totally a legit answer to that. So yeah, and I guess otherwise, like internally, for artists that we've been working with because they have successful applications, projects are being delayed, and that's fine. Like we've been I've really enjoyed my job in the past couple of years because I've been able to put a lot of artists at ease because they're really worried about meeting these report deadlines, and we're so flexible with this. So we understand that nothing's happening as we expect it to right now, and we're working with artists to make sure that we can still support what they're doing.
Another, just a follow-up to that, is there, and this could also be with Factor Quebec or with the Canada Council, is there a specific stream of funding for festivals, or is it specifically for individual artists who maybe want to perform at a festival? How does that go? Because we're talking about when everybody gets back outside and, we all want to get back together. Is there any type of funding for festivals?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a program called the Collective Initiatives Program, where, and I'll speak from festivals that are in Montreal primarily, where we support festivals like Pop Montreal, M for Montreal, Mutech. We support all these kinds of festivals through the Collective Initiatives Program. But we also, and that's primarily for festivals who have been around for a while and have a track record. But also if you're a newish festival or you're looking to start a festival, particularly genre-based festivals, then there's also a program called the Sponsorship Program that will look at applications and help to support festivals and organizations who are just starting out in the music industry and in the festival circuit.
Great, interesting. And the Canada Council, is there a festival as well?
Yeah, there's a program called Public Outreach, which is through the Arts Across Canada program. So it's a component of Arts Across Canada, and that's what funds festivals. Essentially, the idea is to be able to give funding to festivals that help, help expand and enhance the appreciation of arts across Canada.
Interesting. So there you got it, people. Brian Smith here from the Youth Stars Foundation. We are here. We are with our artist panel. If you're an artist, Canadian artist, if you're looking for supports, resources, you do have a responsibility to reach out to these organizations. These are just two of them. Plus, we have Bipoc Afternoon who's here, who's gone through the process. In wrapping up, I'm going to ask each of you a question as far as, what we can do to improve the process. I mean, the process is there, it's working, we could always fine tune it. How could we improve the process, and what would be a word of motivation to that youth, that senior, that Indigenous artist, that Black artist who's watching today and say, you know what, I need some help, I got some talent, I need a little bit of help to take it to the next level? What would you say to them? And I'll start with you, B-Boy.
I'm going to give a few words, but for me, it's telling people to take action. So the first thing is knowing your craft and yourself, because that's something that's going to be super important when you're going to be applying. Knowing your goals and your objectives. Oftentimes when people come and apply for grants, they just see everything and they get disoriented. See and know what you want to do, and then see what lines up. Work on your grant proposal. And when I do say work, I mean it's work. Don't see it as something just to lightly be done. Dedicate some time to it. Get feedback. Get someone that doesn't know anything about art and get them to read it. If they can't understand it, maybe there's something that you can do about it. And you might have people in your surroundings that just know how to write well. They can help structure your sentences, your ideas, so on and so forth. And then finally, if you're unsuccessful, just dust yourself off and try again. You already have a base on which to work on. Ask for feedback and just try again.
I just want to the panel too as well. When somebody sends in an application and it's not accepted, can they find out what they need to work on?
Absolutely. So the way that Factor works is we have a scoring system based on the budget that we have and the number of applications that we get for that deadline. And if you don't get the score that is needed to get the funding, then you will receive information about your score and details. So different programs have a slightly different scoring grid, but you'll get the breakdown of that grid, which includes things like, musicality, songwriting, in some cases for some programs, a marketing plan, things like that. So you'll be scored on those criteria, and you'll be able to get that score and see where you performed really well and where you might need to have a little bit of improvement. You can also ask for jury feedback, which can be really helpful, because combined with your score and the feedback, the jury feedback is usually a bit more specific in terms of, well, you might want to look at improving this a little bit more. I didn't see any information about XYZ in your plan. You might want to include that. And then you can reapply the next year for funding as well.
Isra, a word to the Indigenous youth across Canada, or Indigenous peoples across Canada who want to get involved with and want to apply to the Canada Council of the Arts. What do you have to say to them? You have a message to touch the passion, to touch their hearts. What is it you have to say to them?
I think Afternoon really made the points, especially about reapplying in creating, knowing, and sharing. We have 4 deadlines. So if you miss a deadline, there's going to be another one in 4 months, because our deadlines align with the equinoxes, and so, which is important for us, and so yeah, reapplying. Canada Council, technically we don't give feedback anymore from the juries, but and we're trying to change it so that people are being proactive and calling us in advance. Because if you call me in advance, if you email me and you email me your proposal, I will go, we can set up a meeting and we can go through it together. And I will give you feedback based on what I'm seeing, right there. So yeah, I think it's important to really focus in and just have the idea first. I think if you're coming to council, it can be very scary and daunting, especially if you don't feel prepared or specific questions. Have your idea, I guess, is a big part of it. Even if the idea is just, I want to get more training, I want, this is what I want, my goal is to be this kind of artist, and to get to that goal, it might be I need to apply to get additional training, or, to work with somebody. So yeah.
All right, Jen.
I'd love to, yeah, perfect. I think I agree that Afternoon said all the best things. All of that is so true, that, know who you are, know what you're doing, know what you want to do, know what you want to achieve. And I think another thing I would add to that, and what's really important to articulate in your application for Canada Council at least, is all of that, but also the why. So why do you do what you do? Why do you want to reach these goals? And why are you proposing this particular project? Because you want to get these peer assessors who are also artists, so they get the process to really dig into your artistic universe and totally get who you are. Because as soon as they buy into that, peer assessment is such a human process. As soon as you read something and you're just I get who this person is, I get what they want to do, and now that I get who this person is, I feel like nobody else could do it but them. This makes total sense. Their unique perspective is what makes this so special, and I'm all in, And then if everything else about the project is super planned out and all your details are there and it's clear, you can't go wrong. So it's really, get your idea fleshed out. And to also add to what Afternoon said about getting somebody to read it and to give you feedback on your application. One of my favorite tips is, especially when it comes to what you want to say about yourself as an artist and the whys of your project and that kind of stuff that seems really nebulous and hard to communicate, get somebody to read it and explain it back to you. And then you get to kind of see like what they've hung on to and what they think the key messages are. And then you can reframe everything if you feel like, oh, that's not really what I wanted to come across. Like I really wanted to emphasize this. So it kind of allows you to see what sticks.
Wow. Siobhan, any last words as we wrap up?
Man, I don't know what to say. I mean, this is all excellent feedback. So I would just echo what Jen and Isidra and Afternoon have said already. Yeah, I think it is really important to know who you are, to know what you want to do, and at least, have a plan for your career. So even if you're just starting out, what's the first thing you want to do? Is it just to record an EP, record a couple tracks? Great. There are programs for that. Look at that. And then also start to think, okay, what's the next step there? Do you want to record an album, or do you want to play some showcases, or whatever the case may be? Doing research is super important. Try and get as informed as you can. Coming to events like this is super important. Looking for resources on Canada Council site, on the Factor site, signing up for newsletters, for workshops, and following social media for more tips on where you can attend free workshops is really great. Jen, love what you said, have somebody else review it. Believe it or not, spelling and grammar does count. It shows sort of your, the level of seriousness that you're taking the application and your professionalism. And I'd also say to Jen, what you said, it's why are you doing this? And how are you going to do it? So that's where I find a lot of the artists that I work with stumble. It's, well, I'm gonna go on tour because I'm gonna build a bigger fan base. Okay, great. How are you going to do that? So also who can help you out with that? And that doesn't mean that you have to have a manager or a record label or anything like that. Just if you've got friends or family members or anyone else in the community who can help support you. And again, I really like what Afternoon had to say about that. It's community support. Reach out to members of your community who've had success. And then of course, come and talk to us. We can help you. We can walk you through it. We can provide answers and answer your questions and provide information on what might be the best option for you, depending on where you are in your career.
Right. Great information, people. If you're watching it, this is the Unity Link Up 2022, Canada Council of the Arts. Look them up. They're online. We're living in a world where information is easily accessible. We've got Factor Quebec, Factor Canada. If you're living in the province of Quebec and you're an English artist, there's also the English language arts network. I connected with them over the summer. So in each and every province, there's groups, there's coalitions that are there. As B-Boy had mentioned before, connect with other artists who maybe have gone through the process, have been successful, and try to pick their brains and have a collective approach to a lot of the things that are going on. Because as I said, together we can be very, very successful. As we move on, just to let you know that later this afternoon at 3:30, we're going to be back online. We have our panel with Victor Beausoleil and Destiny Gregoire, going to be talking about strategies. We're talking about community, how you could get involved and give back to your community. I also want to let you know too as well, later on, we're going to be having our drawing. Thank you very much for Domino's. Those of you going to get your name drawn, you will get a free Domino's gift card courtesy of Domino's Pizzeria here in Quebec. If you live outside of the province, we will send a gift card to you so you can get some of that wonderful pizza. So the panel, I want to thank you very, very much. It's a great opportunity, great time. We just have these, an hour and a half just to converse and share information. If you're an artist out there, if you've picked up some information today, please let us know. This Zoom is being recorded, so you can go back on it and look at it as well. The Facebook Live, it will be recorded. You could go back and look at that as well. But as I said, I encourage all of the artists across Canada, take the time, access the resources, get involved with your community, share information. And you don't have to do everything all in one day. Let it be a process. One thing is to enjoy the process that you're doing, because the reason why you are an artist is that you have passion for something. So enjoy the process. My name is Brian Smith, courtesy of the Youth Stars Foundation, Unity Link Up 2022, put on by the Youth Stars Foundation, supported by RBC and Canadian Heritage. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day. If you're here living in Quebec or in Montreal, we got a lot of snow outside, so you got to go get some of that shoveling in. But, and if you don't want to shovel, just stay logged in, come back and log in at 3:30 and partake in our community panel. So from Brian Smith, courtesy of the Youth Stars Foundation, to the panel, thank you very, very much for participating with us today. And we look forward to working with you in the future again. So thank you very much. My name is Brian Smith. I am gone. One love.